Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back. I am Pseudo, and this is a preview for Visions of Eternity, the Antiquary, Ritualist, and Paragon. Cal Cohan and hopefully Trig, and maybe a designer or two will be taking it away here in a moment, but I'll be doing a light commentary over this. Feel free to hop in, hang out, and I will do my best to not talk over them. I know it's a common complaint, but I have to add something, otherwise it's not transformative. Anyway, grab your kids, hide your wife, grab a drink, let's go. We got 2 minutes. Briefly talking about what I think that they'll do, I think the Paragon will be kind of overloaded, as will the Antiquary in terms of skill balance, but maybe that's what people want. I don't know. I think there's room for a goofier Thief Elite spec, but depending on how goofy, we'll see. Ritualist looks amazing, but I don't know how jazzed I am that they can only keep their spirits up in Shroud. Anyway, it's good to see you guys. Hey Sergio, hey Raffle, what's up? But we'll be starting here in a minute. Let me know what you think as we go through this. We'll be talking in chat. Again, this is just for the record, for VODs, and for people to catch up on it. So I'm pretty excited. I'm pretty stoked, and I'm pretty sure as heck excited to see Warrior finally getting an elite spec. That's possibly support, if nothing else, so that we can have some room on the other specs. But we'll be going here in a minute, and I think that's about all I got. Let's go. And they haven't fixed their microphones. Excellent. Nope, that's on my end.
Totally done a sound check. Taylor, can you demonstrate?
Guess I didn't.
Please.
Hello, I'm here today to speak at a normal volume that will not deafen anyone.
All right, I'll take that hit. Good job, guys.
Yeah, so obviously we're hoping to have a fewer technical difficulties today as we come back with the second of 3 Elite Spec preview streams. We have today the Antiquary, the Paragon, and the Ritualist. Pretty excited, right, Taylor?
Yep.
Excited can't you tell they sound
show off
so excited.
Some specs that people have been waiting for a while, and a new one that it's a surprise to many people. The Antiquary is pretty interesting spec. We're excited to show people with some elements that haven't really put into any elite specialization before. And we'll get into that in a second, but pretty excited to show people what we've created.
Yeah, and as always, keep in mind we're building up toward the beta. There's going to be a lot of things that aren't quite finished yet. We're still doing some final polish, doing some final balance tuning, even tweaking a few traits here and there. So on this stream you'll see some temporary text, a lot of things that might not look as optimal as they will once we get down the road to launch, but the idea is that we're getting these to a point where they are very much playable and in a place where we feel pretty good about a lot of the mechanics. We're not saying that everything's going to be perfect, but we're going to try out some crazy stuff. Some of it's not going to work. We're going to go back after the beta between then and launch and make some additional updates as needed. So just keep that in mind as you're watching this today, as you're playing through the beta. We're definitely looking for that feedback from all of you to see what is working, what isn't working, what needs to be improved, and we'll definitely see some changes between beta and launch. But anything else you want to mention, Taylor, before we hop right in?
No, I think
we're gonna try some stuff that's not gonna work.
All right. I hope everyone is hydrating and ready. I will be talking more today, so ready to go. We'll be kicking things off with the Antiquary today. So, as mentioned, anyone who read the blog, we kind of have have a vague understanding of the spec. So as always, we're going to go over all the new profession stuff, all the new utility skills, all the new traits. Don't even have the correct elite skill equipped here. But the first things first, the Antiquary is kind of this like a collector of various artifacts from across Tyria. So we're going to see all those different artifacts as we use Grit Snatch. This is the new replacement for Steel. This is just going to be a ranged, kind of similar to Deadeye in that sense, where it's not going to be a forced teleport in, but you're going to have a ranged button that gives you your stolen bundles that will in this
I
case
can't,
be
guys. Why
drawn
the
from a
icons is
random collection of these artifacts.
just
And
a
the idea is
foot?
that every time that you Grit Snatch, the baseline is you're just going to have 2 of these. You see, this might be teasing towards something where the F4 button appears. We'll get to that once we get into the traits.
Mm.
Where we're going to get access to a couple of different artifacts. There's a pool of 8 different artifacts that we can draw from. 4 of them are more offensively focused, 4 of them are more defensively focused. And the idea is that, you know, every time that you Grit Snatch, you will get a couple of these, or maybe even a few of these, depending on your trait selections. And that is going to kind of you know, play into your decision making as you adapt to the situation at hand as you draw these. And obviously, there is an element of randomness to this. We're gonna, once we get into the traits, we're gonna see the adept tier is entirely dedicated to ways to mitigate that randomness, because, you know, we know as designers, as we're putting this together, that there's always a fine line to walk when we're making something that has a little bit more inherent randomness than you know, other things that just don't have any. And we want to make sure that there's opportunities for this randomness to exist and kind of that fun, you know, moment-to-moment decision-making to happen without having like too many low-roll situations that feel really bad, or like really high-roll situations that blow out, so that, you know, when you're trying to do your DPS benchmark and you get your 1% high roll, that is your like 80k DPS or something, you know, that's not really what we're going for. You know, there will be some things that are slightly more powerful than others, because that is going to just play into, you know, there's going to be some skills that are just raw damage and some that have a little bit more utility baked in. Or we'll see, like, as we get into the traits, there's some mitigation there. And then we're also going to be keeping a very close eye on this as we get into the beta and, you know, all the feedback around this, seeing like how much of the randomness works, how much, you know, maybe we need to have a little bit more mitigation in their baseline. We'll see how it goes. But the idea is that we have kind of a wider collection of really powerful stolen bundles, and every time that you steal, you're going to get a couple of these or a few of these.
That's at a healing skill. I'm scared.
So we're going to run through all of these. I'm going to use some developer cheats so that the stream doesn't take a while to go through all of them, because you never know what you're going to grab, but I'm just going to give myself some. I guess it's worth mentioning, every time that you steal, you can use 1 of these 2 bundles by default. Obviously, if you have improvisation, that's going to let you use another one, and there might even be a trait that allows you to use a 3rd stolen skill every time that you pilfer or Grit Snatch.
This is kind of wild, actually. I'm a little scared, chat.
Offensive bundles. Starting off with the Metal Legion guitar. This one's a bit more of a kind of like a hybrid-y damage and a little bit of CC in there as well. So we're going to walk over here to some of our enemy golems. Play the guitar. That's going to do some pulsing damage, apply some confusion, and then we're going to slam the guitar down, do a little bit of extra damage, and a nice little stun there.
What I'm watching.
So, you know, we're going to see like some condition damage elements on some of these skills as well. So there's going to be a mix of, you know, power damage and condition damage, and you obviously see some CC here as well. So this skill will probably do a little bit less damage than some of the pure DPS skills that we see.
How's that work in competitive, Kel?
You can play this a few times. I'm cheating, so you know I can just use this skill as many times as I want, and there's nothing that these golems can do about it. But, as we kind of showed off earlier, you will only get to use these a single
Why didn't he show the F1 first?
You can move with the guitar, you know, just in case it's not.
Oh yeah, you want to rock out.
So you're not rooted that entire time.
Did they just like hate showing off the actual steals? They did this with the Deadeye one as well.
Like
Show the F1, dude.
Next up, we're going to take a look at the Forged Surfer Dash. This one's going to be a ground-targeted dash. Still a little bit more offensively focused. We'll see a couple of mobility skills on the defensive end as well. But this one is just going to be
a couple mobility skills, huh?
Some exploding bombs on the ground. So we can see this here. dashing through all these golems, dropping a bunch of
Ooh, that's
AoEs on the
cool.
ground. That's going to do some pretty relevant damage and burning. So a
Seems to
nice
be
little
more condies
mobility
back.
skill. You can obviously use this to run away as well, and enemies chasing you might run over all your bombs or force dodges or whatever have you. But a nice little combo of mobility and damage on this one. Get a close up on this dash. It's pretty cool. Riding the Forge Surfer stuff, surfing across the stage, if you will. Next up, we're going to take a look at the Cryptus turret. So this one is just going to be ground targeted. Place this on the ground somewhere. Here's the little script assistant is hanging off of that. I don't know if that happens all the time. I've seen it sometimes where it doesn't. So that's a nice little bonus that you might notice sometimes.
A lot of the effects have little script in them for you to see.
Sometimes your little script assistant will appear, but this is a pretty straightforward. Summon the turret. This is going to be like the main bread and butter damage skill. Only does damage, but it's going to shoot at the nearest enemy and do some pretty nice damage.
Yeah, this is kind of cool. It's kind of like a walking tour of what we just did, D&D. It's not bad. Little homages back. I really wish they'd show the F1 skill. I want to see it.
Won't attack them, but you can try your best, I guess.
The animation.
Next up, we have the Mistburn Mortar. This is another one of the pretty aggressive damage skills. This one is going to fire off and create an area that is pulsing some burning.
Oh, the FPS drop area. I remember that one.
No, I don't have a trade on it now. This is just going to be a nice little ranged pulsing field. Does some burning, does some damage. Nice little well of whatever you want to call it. But this is again, going to be one of the more powerful offensive skills because it is just a raw damaging ability.
I like how everyone was like, Gambler spec. Wait, no, it's not a Gambler spec. Wait, no, it is a Gambler spec. Crap. What?
Next, we'll start to take a look at some of the defensive artifacts.
Yeah, it's a lot more
Starting with the
baked in
Exalted
condies.
Hammer. So this one's going to be an evade. Also,
It's going to be a what?
600 range leap, so we can leap over here. The idea is that it is going to do some damage. This is something that even the defensive artifacts are going to have a little bit of damage attached to them because, again, we want to kind of mitigate some of the low rolly aspects where if you are in a situation where you want to use a defensive artifact, you can still use it and get some amount of damage. It's obviously not going to be as much damage as any of the offensive artifacts, but you will still get that defensive capability, get that evade, get some healing, and still do a little bit of damage if you're landing on an enemy. But, nice little defensive skill with a nice little heal attached to that. And slam the ground with the Exalted Hammer.
Turn this up anymore.
Next up, Shield. So this one
See if
is
that
more
helps.
of a projectile destruction type of defensive skill. So we're going to drop it down. We see our little Scrit assistant helping us out here, creating the barrier that is going to destroy projectiles. This is also going to pulse some damage to enemies in the area. It's also a light field if you find some use for that, combo through it. If you really want to, but the big thing here is that this is going to be that powerful projectile destruction defensive skill. Close up on our...
At least all the icons are very different colors, Germany. So that at least they're pretty easy to tell, but I agree. They should match the skill effect. They already kind of had a blue one, though.
Couple more artifacts to look at before we move on. But next up, we have the Zephyrite Sun Crystal. This one's going to be a stun break.
What?
Also another one of those ground targeted dashes. And does have a little bit of a burning attached to it at the end here. But, you can always use this to get away. Or dash in. You're going to be having that long duration evade if you're going kind of the max distance.
What?
Have that nice little burning explosion at the end. So again, stun break as well. And then long distance dash with evasion. Pretty powerful defensive skill.
Pseudo doesn't like that one. Pseudo doesn't like that one at all.
And last but not least, we have the Hollow Dancer Decoy. This one's going to be more of a crowd control-y type of effect. It does do some damage and some crowd control, but it is kind of tied in with the defensive artifacts we see here. We summon the Scrit Hollow Dancer. The enemies are all distracted and taunted, and then it explodes, doing some damage. So, pretty long taunt. 3 seconds baseline here. And that can obviously set up some of your offensive skills if you are playing like the improv build.
I think that's the longest taunt in the
your own
game.
weapon skills or some of the double-edged skills that we will get to very shortly.
Bro, you're never gonna catch Antiquaries in World versus World with that dash thing.
Anything you wanted to add on the artifacts, Taylor, before we move on?
I just want to know, would the Scrit Hollow Dancer work on you, Cal?
I like that he waited till he was drinking to ask that.
I'm not sure it would, but you know, it probably would because it'll just taunt me, and everyone knows that taunt is my favorite condition in Guild Wars 2.
Oh, that makes sense why he
of
would
course.
put it
Kind
on
of
stuff.
unavoidable, you know. There's something alluring about it, right?
Three-second taunt, 900
Anyway,
range evade
let's
dash.
go ahead and move on to double-edged skills.
Show
and
the
we'll get into
F1.
traits. So, we talked about this mechanic a little bit in the blog as well, where the double-edged skills are essentially... The best way to describe them is kind of like a flip skill, where there is 2 parts. There's the baseline that you'll always use initially, and then there is the secondary component, which is called the backfire. And the way that this mechanic works is, after I use the skill, it's going to do, what it does. And then as it's recharging, you have the opportunity to use the skill again. And the idea is that, in this, right there, I didn't get the backfire, so I was able to use the base skill again with essentially no downside. Or on a shorter recharge than is typically intended. And that's going to be based off how much of the skill recharge is left. So if there's 50% of this recharge remaining, then I have a 50% chance to backfire. And in this case, I did get the backfire, and then it goes on full recharge. You can't continue to activate it as soon as the skill has backfired. So a lot of these are more of a risk-reward that we'll see on some of the utilities. But for the heal, we kept it pretty straightforward. It is more of just an all upside where, you can just use this button. You'll probably just press this button back to back because you want to get that big heal, get that big cleanse. But there's going to be a lot more decision making as we get into some of the rest of these skills here. This is just a good example of like how the mechanic works, and there's really no downside to backfiring, but we are able to, have that, I guess, extra decision point, because will be times where you just want to like the sustained heal, and maybe you press it with like 3 seconds left because you think, okay, well now I get a pretty low chance of getting that failure state. I can just use my heal a little bit more often than I typically can. And then sometimes you are going to want that double tap, more likely to backfire. I didn't even backfire there with a 70% chance. Quite lucky.
Where's the barrier? What's the barrier from, Cal?
So, we will see some of that.
No, go back.
Skills as well.
No, go back.
Powerful downsides, I guess you would say, or a large opportunity cost of some of these backfire skills. But the idea is that, the baseline is there is just this skill that you press, and it gives you a baseline effect, and then you can just ignore the mechanic if you want to, and never risk backfiring. But there is always going to be like, you could save a couple seconds off your cooldown and have a pretty low % chance for something to go wrong. Maybe you want to roll the dice. So again, anti-venom drop, pretty straightforward. Small heal and Condy removal on a low cooldown, or you can go for that backfire, get a big heal, big Condy removal, and it will go on a longer cooldown when that happens. Next up, we'll take a look at the Stone Summit Cannon. So this is going to conjure another Scrit Helper to kind of fire this cannon. We're going to see it does a pretty big AoE burning, AoE damage. Oh, and I got the backfire there right away. I'm just going to show this skill off a few times without risking the backfire. We do see just a pretty strong
not a projectile
here. Big damage, big burning, long range. Well, 900 range, more of that mid-rangey type range. But then we did see the backfire there.
What's base health damage?
Let's just show it off. Real time. The idea is that the cannon itself kind of does a backfire. So the Scrit's like, what's going on? And then it explodes and it does a bunch of damage. Notably, this will deal damage to yourself as well, but it is pretty easy to walk out of, as we saw. So we're just going to fire that off. I'm going to walk out of it. These golems are going to stand there, and they're going to get hit by an even stronger...
They're almost like double cast skills that are allowed to be... Like overcharge cartridges that are allowed to be a little
really well with
more powerful.
CC skills, or other players CCing for you, or bosses that typically don't move very much. pretty low risk because it is, once again, there I got a pretty rapid succession of multiple uses of the base skill into that backfire. It's very easy for you to walk out of it. So this one, again, is pretty low risk. And if you are looking for that burst of damage, it might be something that you want to press back to back.
Can I get you to do a close-up on the scrit during the backfire?
Oh, yeah.
Just make sure that everyone sees what's going on there.
Getting incredibly lucky again. Showing up one more time.
No.
What's going on? There's something wrong with this. And then
You know, if you were playing this spec with the goal to do the most damage, what would your number be, Cal?
The
what
benchmarks like
percent
this are
chance
going to
would you
be
risking to do the backfire?
wild.
Because I think, you know, normally taking like a 10% chance, if there's like a second left on the cooldown, seems pretty good. Get a lot of value sustained, but
well, I mean, this skill doesn't go on a longer cooldown, so I'm just double tapping this all the time.
right.
Because, you know, I can press W and I can walk out of this. That's no problem. I don't know, maybe the boss is gonna CC me and it's all gonna go wrong. Next up, we will take a look at the
foot,
Inquest portal device.
which, as everybody knows, is a
This
foot.
one's going to be a bit more mobility as well.
Why is it a foot,
It
Cal?
Shadow Step does a little
It
bit
does
of
a what?
a little bit of damage, a little bit of vulnerability, kind of like that setup, you know, dash in, kind of that scene of infiltration type skill. And then the backfire, this is a pretty powerful skill that if you could use it back to back, so there's a pretty big downside here as well. If you do backfire on this Shadow Step, I didn't because I waited a long time, playing it safe. But here we go again. That's going to knock you down.
Okay,
So
it does teleport you and knock you
more
down.
of a break in case of emergency type skill, where if you are, you know, porting away from somebody and then you need to port away again, you're obviously gonna get knocked down. Maybe you combo with a stun break or you have stability. You know, there's definitely options with this skill, but a lot of the time you will probably just use the front half of the skill, and then the backside will be purely for emergencies, or you know, maybe you can get really lucky and Shadow Step multiple times in quick succession.
You know, you gotta be ready for the backfire because life comes at you fast. You know, porting in but getting knocked down, that seems maybe not the best thing to happen to
And
you.
then a gale shot
Definitely
kills you
high
from
risk, but again,
4,000 range
a very
away.
Powerful effect, being able to, you know, Shadow Step multiple times off one skill.
Yeah.
So we'll see that again as we get into, well, the next skill here, Emergency Jade Shield. This is going to be a stun break, and notably, the backfire side of this is also a stun break.
What?
So
No, it's
the
not.
base of this skill is we're just going to get a little bit of barrier. We're going to do a stun break, so a nice little defensive skill here. And the backfire is that you will have the shield kind of explode, so you will take a lot of damage. I can stop cheating all super heavily here, so we can just see a pretty notable amount of damage to yourself. You obviously get a little bit of barrier on top of that, and you had barrier from the front half, so there is, you know, some built-in defense.
I don't like
and this will
the
do, you know, a
barrier
bit of
part of
damage
this.
as well. We are hitting this golem with this explosion in addition to ourselves, kind of the same idea that we saw with the Stone Summit Cannon. But
These
this
downsides
is,
don't seem that
again,
bad.
a very powerful defensive skill where you will have kind of a almost
Just
an ammo
saying.
stun break that
Yeah, almost an
recharges
ammo
the
stun
entirety of
break.
it every time the recharge comes down. So there is a pretty significant trade-off here for the backfire with that damage to yourself.
I want to point out that once this is recharged, you can use a lot of these twice. It's not like you need to wait for both counts to recharge. It just
So,
recharges the skill,
something
and
that
then you can double
potentially
press a
combo
lot
off
of
the
these.
portal device as well. You know, maybe you
This
port
is...
and then you realize you need to port again, and then you can even just use the front half of the
God,
Jade Shield to break out of that stun.
Everything is just better Bladesworn at this point.
And last up here we have the Canuck coin toss. So a fun little coin flip animation here. And the idea is that things are going to happen based off of whether you flip heads or tails. And there is obviously some baseline here. So we see the front half of this skill. This is going to be more of just a initiative and condition removal skill. And if you win that coin flip, each time you win that coin flip, you'll get a little bit of an extra initiative bump and a condition converted to a boon, as opposed to just a single initiative and a condition removal. But, you know, for all the statisticians in chat, you guys can do the expected value of a coin flip pretty easily. So you can see that, you know, maybe you
All
end
these
up
backfires
with
aren't that bad.
1.5 initiative every time you flip a coin, so 4.5 initiative every time you use that skill, and you know, you'll convert 1.5 conditions.
I'm on
to
board
boons
with
every
Antiquary
time
now.
you
This is
press the
wildly
button.
nuts.
But this is just more of that, you know, again, condition removal, initiative lets you do a lot of things. You know, if you flip 3 heads, maybe it should even give you an additional bonus initiative because you got that 1 in 8 but currently it doesn't. That's just a fun aside. But you will still get 6 initiative back, and converting 3 conditions to boons on a pretty low cooldown. So a nice little initiative skill here. Then obviously you can reactivate this again. If you do backfire, we see the red coins here to indicate that something terrible has happened. This is going to be another example of like more of a break in case of emergency, because there's going to be a pretty significant downside here, where when you reuse this skill, you will always be removing boons from yourself. And when you lose the coin flip, you will even convert those boons into conditions, but it will be that more of that emergency, more initiative button. And this one, you know, the risk reward probably quite isn't there yet. We want to maybe crank up the initiative on the backfire side.
Oh no,
so
you
that
don't. It's okay.
You know, getting something for that, you know, removing boons from yourself, obviously not something you want to do very often, but we do want to find the right balance for these backfires where they are actually decision points where you choose whether or not you actually want to use this secondary component of the skill.
This is very interesting.
And last up, we have the elite skill here, the Scrit Scuffle. I'm going to take a quick water break as people read very quickly.
This 10,000 damage.
But the idea here is that we're going to create an area where the scrits they're just going wild, digging up everything, and we're going to see here that every interval, every 3 seconds, we're getting essentially a new set of artifacts. Sometime we're going to get this unstable script bomb, and this one is kind of a this is something that you can use to set up yourself or your allies. You know, you can stun break out of this, kind of like that headbutt type of self CC and enemy CC. It's supposed to be more of like a downside as opposed to just getting like the artifacts that you want. So it's intended to be a little bit less common that you'll actually use that skill, but there are going to be situations where, you know, that is a pretty powerful CC effect. And as we see here, we're continuously getting new artifacts for the duration of this skill, and we can be firing them off, getting new artifacts. That's going to be pretty useful as we get into some of the traits that care about using artifacts. Don't want to dash out of the
traits
radius
that care about
because
using
that will
artifacts,
prevent you
chat.
from getting the next artifacts, but we do see you. Just a pretty powerful skill. You essentially get to steal 5 times is the elite skill here. Yeah, so let's just get right into the traits, because there's a lot of things that care about artifacts, and there's a lot of things that, you know, we have some of that RNG mitigation as
I swear
well.
somebody from
I'm gonna
another
put on
game did the art
improvisation
for this
because
guy.
That's my favorite way to play with the Antiquary at the moment, because again, that does give you the extra artifact uses, and we'll see even more artifact uses as we get into some of these adept traits.
Keep in mind, he
starting
said...
things off, here's a trinket collector, explains the specialization. You can kind of scroll through all the different artifacts here.
Oh, really?
We'll come back to all of those later for all of the screenshotters. Some people may have noticed the Magpie's Defense triggering as we were kind of
yeah, I
showing
don't
stuff
like
off.
that.
This is going to say when you use your healing skill or elite skill, you're going to get some personal barrier. These are separate cooldowns, so I use my heal skill, I get some barrier, and I'm going to then immediately use my elite skill, get some additional barrier. So a nice little self-survivability.
Oh, disgusting.
Right, and then right away, the Enterprising Aristocrat. Every time you use an artifact skill, you're going to get some initiative.
Oh
back.
my
So
god.
here, immediately we see like a big value with the elite skill. You're going to potentially get back 10 initiative.
You're never catching these things in PvP,
even more
chat.
opportunity to get even more stolen skills. We'll get to that
Never
very quickly.
gonna happen.
Starting off with the kind of RNG mitigation, some people probably noticed here we got the reshuffle here when we selected the card swap adept trait.
Oh my god, it is a gambling spec.
The idea is that
Like, straight
every
up.
time you reshuffle your artifacts, which is now a skill that you have, you can spend 2 initiative every 5 seconds to redraw. So we can just demonstrate that here.
That doesn't
This
seem
won't
that good.
Redraw empty slots. So I have improvisation equipped, which means I can use both of these. So if I do use the first artifact here, my improvisation not work as intended. You break something, Taylor.
Wasn't me.
Nope. Okay.
I like how the Reddit was so down on
we'll
this.
look into that one. But we now see when I reshuffle, I only get to redraw a single artifact because that is the only artifact that I had remaining. And this is also going to give you a little bit condition removal. So just a powerful defensive trait as well. Every 5 seconds, you can spend 2 initiative and remove a condition from yourself.
I told you, man, it's nice when ANET does weird crap.
Next up, we have the split deck. This guarantees that you'll get an offensive artifact and a defensive
Okay, I was
artifact
wondering
every time
about
you
that.
steal. This is something that
So it lowers the chances to 1 and 4
we're
of
really
each.
considering this one should maybe even be baseline to the spec, but we want to see how it plays in the beta first, because this is
Yeah, I
going
was
to be
gonna
like
say.
a big reduction in those cases where you really need a defensive artifact and you just draw 2 offensive ones, and that feels pretty bad. And similarly, when you're just looking to maximize your damage and you draw 2 defensive artifacts, this is going to prevent you from doing that. Maybe that should just be how the mechanic works in the first place, but we're going to see like how it plays in the beta, because there is like
I mean, options are always nice.
a couple more. The bottom trait here is even more powerful, so maybe it needs to have that extra layer of randomness on top of the prolific
Right.
plunderer. But again, play with it during the beta. Let us know what you think. We're definitely thinking about that type of thing already, where maybe you should always draw an offensive and defensive, and there could be some alternative RNG mitigation on this trait.
Well, it's still random. It's just
Next up, we have
drops it down to
Prolific
1 and
Plunderer.
4.
This gives you an additional artifact slot, and you can then use an additional artifact every time you pilfer. So now I have Improvisation and I have Prolific Plunderer, which means every time that I get 3 artifacts, I can use all 3 of them.
Oh my
It's very
gosh.
powerful, because again, we have Enterprising Aristocrat.
This
every
is
time you're
good.
using
These are
artifact
traits
and
that
getting
actually
initiative back.
change.
This is definitely, my favorite way to play, because you just get to use all the fun toys and you get a bunch of initiative back, which means you get to use all your weapons skills a
Meaningful
bunch.
trait trade-offs,
just-
chat.
It's pretty fun. What do you think, Taylor?
Meaningful traits.
Yeah, I think I also prefer just like max randomness here. As many slots you don't really get, but you gotta operate on the fly. Just take a quick look what you stole and then
Oh my
use
god,
them
he
in
used the
combat.
F1.
Have to really be on your feet when you play this spec, especially with this trait. So I think it makes the spec a lot more interesting when you take it.
And of course, that does make it more likely that you always draw an offensive or defensive, but it will not guarantee that as split.
Yeah, how does the offensive defensive split if you always get 3?
Moving into
But I guess
the
we'll
master
see.
tier, we're going to start with Scoundrel's Luck. So this is this plays into the backfire mechanic. The idea is that every time that you use Scrit Snatch,
Excuse me,
the
what?
next time you use a double-edged skill that is recharging, it will guarantee that you get the front half of that skill again. It
That's
will
a
not trigger backfire.
grandmaster. What?
So
Why is that
actually
there?
Very strong with one of the skills that we showed off with those more detrimental downsides, with like the emergency Jade Shield or the Inquest Portal device. That means I can use my Scrit Snatch. It's difficult. I just say steal all the time, and it's confusing. But
call
then
it
we
pilfer.
can port in, and then we can immediately port again, and that's going to guarantee that we're not going to get knocked down there. Then we can even port again, and probably get knocked down, but it does give you essentially 1 free use of a backfire to avoid a backfire every time that you steal, which is potentially very strong with especially these 2 skills, but all the skills except for probably the heal. You probably don't want to use your heal to use up your Scoundrel's Luck.
Oh, it has a
Next up,
cooldown.
Meticulous
Okay,
Custodian.
that's fine.
This is just going to improve all your artifacts. So again, this is a great trait with the improv build, where you are getting 3 artifacts every time, able to use all 3 artifacts every time. We can kind of scroll through here. Metal Legion Guitar getting more damage, more confusion, additional stun duration. Forge Surfer Dash, we're going to see more damage, more burning. Misper Mortar, same thing, more damage, more burning. Just improvements to all of the artifacts here. The Chalk Shield, a little bit more duration, a bit more damage as well. Exalted Hammer, going to do some more damage, do some
I
more
like you
healing.
can scroll through
It
and
looks like
see
the
all of them.
healing number is
Didn't know you could
incorrect
do that.
on this specific instance, but it will be larger than the one that we saw on the initial skill in game. And the Cryptus Turret obviously doing more damage. Hollow Dancer doing a bit more damage. The radius here is going to be larger, so even more likely to trap enemies inside. And the Zephyrite Sun Crystal going to do a little bit more burning at the end of that dash. So, the more that you're using artifacts, the more that you might find this trait valuable to make your artifacts better. Makes sense to me. And last up, we have Exhilarating Ephemera. This is just going to be more of that typical damage bonus trait. So every time you use an artifact, you're going to get some duration of this damage bonus. And we do see that you can kind of... You'll want to have either the Prolific Plunderer here or Improvisation, so that you're able to use multiple artifacts to stack up that buff and kind of get the max duration of this increased damage window.
I think they could both be PvE choices, Maddie. I think you can play this as
Take a
power
quick
or
break for
Conde.
water and mouse over this fun Grandmaster trait.
Don't drink too much water, dude. You'll
Pretty good
explode.
icon for that one.
So we have the Prodigious Pincher. This says that every time you use a certain amount of initiative,
Huh.
you will
I was wondering about that.
pilfer. So that's triggering the Scritch Snatch it won't trigger steal traits, but it will give you a set of artifacts. So we can just show that off real quick. If I pilfer,
feel like
I'm going to use all my skills, and then I'm going to stop cheating so I actually go in combat, and then I'm going to press unload a bunch of times, because that's the best way to play. I'm going to get some initiative, where you see some stacking up. We obviously get lead attacks here at the same time, but this is stacking up, and once we get
10?
to the maximum stack count, that's going to give us a free pilfer,
15.
refilling our artifacts, and we're again playing the build with improvisation and prolific plunderer, so we get to use all 3 of these, and that's going to give me 6 initiative back. So there's a pretty fast-paced gameplay here where you are going to be able to be using a bunch of artifacts, giving you initiative back, using a bunch of initiative, getting more artifacts, and that's going to be kind of like an endless cycle of pilfering. It's pretty fun stuff. Next up, we have Possessive Hoarder. This one is going to be a bit more of a personal survivability trait. So every time that you use an artifact, you will grant barrier to yourself, and you're also going to get a boon depending on if you use an offensive artifact or a defensive artifact.
These
so
can't have
stability, or you can
dude.
get resistance.
No, don't do that. Don't do that.
Again, you know,
please, God,
using
don't do that.
improv and prolific plunderer, this is going to mean that I can get a pretty good number of boons, get some stability, get some more stability. I got 3 defensive artifacts, so I'm going to get a lot of stability.
I don't want to live in this world.
It's pretty good with a split deck trait, so you can always guarantee you have a trigger to give you resistance or stability, whatever you need.
Oh no.
Steal.
And then last up, we have Combat High. This is
this isn't a support
like
spec.
You know, thieves love to do burst damage, so here's the trait.
Yeah, stab also
it's
removes
do
the
a lot of burst
downside of a lot of
backfires.
backfires.
Sustained damage from prodigious pincher, just getting that increased value over time. But Combat High is going to give you a big burst of damage that every time that you crit snatch, this is going to give you 10 stacks of this buff, Combat High, that says increased damage. So we see the baseline as you start at. This is a very large number.
It is a very large
a little
number.
bit lower in competitive modes, but initially you will get that 30% damage buff, and then every couple of seconds that's going to start counting down toward 0, of course. But the idea is that you get that big burst, use a bunch of skills, immediately use all your artifacts, all your offensive artifacts, into that damage bonus. Use
It's
some skills
so
into
weird.
bonus,
That means
and
Deadeye,
then that's
is
gonna be
stuck
true
with.
every time that you steal.
They're not going to
You're
fix
gonna be able
Blades for in
reset
chat.
that
They're not
super
going
high
to do it.
damage burst.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
This-
so that's
this
all we have for
game,
the
man.
Antiquary. A lot of really fun stuff here, and a lot of really cool ideas. And you know, we talked a lot about the randomness and how we're keeping a very close eye on like how these things play, how much more mitigation do we need to make sure that the lows aren't too low, and making sure that, you know, we don't want the highs to be too high, because we don't want those situations where
80k
you do
DPS
feel
versus
like
a 20k DPS
not getting the
benchmark.
highest high
Let's
roll
go.
is actually a low roll. But we are trying to find the right balance of those things as we go into beta and of course beyond. So I'm just going to do some quick hovers for all the things, for all the screenshotters, while we wrap up. And
Okay.
Taylor, if you have any last things to talk about as I click through all of these artifacts.
I love all
Yeah,
of
I
this except
saw,
the stability.
You know, some questions around the self-damaging parts of the backfires. Those only damage yourself. They do not hurt your allies. So,
Tragic.
you know, if you do the
Unfortunately.
mortar and get the backfire, that will only hurt you. I know some people might be sad about that, but and some other questions. I think with regards to like roles of how this fits in places, and you know, boons and PvE especially. I think, you know, we have ideas correct around, you know, maybe this does need to be fit into an alacrity or quickness role. We're specifically interested in the beta to see kind of the core gameplay loops, specifically with like the RNG mechanics, how backfires play, as Cal mentioned, the adept traits. So that's kind of like the focus around our feedback, but we're also keeping an eye on like, is there a way that makes sense to add, you know, some alacrity sharing or quickness sharing, whatever, what have you, with this spec. To give it some extra niches. We think, you know,
Oh, you know,
with the
casually
Grandmaster
just drop
traits should be
alacrity or
pretty
quickness
interesting
in
for
there.
just Pincher, as Cal went over. There's going to be like a lot of more sustained artifacts to hopefully give you pretty good damage over time with it. Keep that the master tier damage bonus up. But also talk about the combat high. It's kind of different from some other thief traits, and this is like specifically a really high burst trait. 30% is a really large number, as you guys are seeing, and the
Correct.
goal here is that we kind of augment how you play. It's a 15% damage modifier over time if you do like quick math, but you should, pool your resources and then use them in that burst window, which isn't always something we see these specs wanting to do. So hopefully it gives it a bit of a different gameplay, in PvE especially.
The question is always, how do you
straight.
kill one? Whenever they show stuff like this or Gale Shot or
Alright.
anything.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like,
And that
what's the
is
counterplay
all the
here?
Things. So I'm going to go back here as we get set up.
What's counterplay,
for
Pseudo?
Paragon.
Anet just runs away.
Yeah, and I think another good question is clarifying the backfire on the elite. The elite you can't activate twice. The backfire is specifically the script bomb part. I believe you have a 20% chance to
weird.
get that script bomb. And when you have the Scoundrel's Luck Master tier trait, that will cause it so that you have a 0% chance to get the script bomb. So you're only getting good stuff when you have those synergies going.
Huh? That was the good one. No, go back. Wait, what? No, I don't.
Then next we'll
What?
head into the Paragon.
Wow, they really want
All
someone to
set
use
up
other
here.
people to use stuff other than Whirlwind. Oh, Ritualist is last. All right. Icons are dope.
All right. We have the Paragon. So I
It's
think
for some
Taylor's
reason
gonna
with a
give me break
longbow.
Here, talk about this one. And I'll be back later to talk about the Ritualist.
Right. So the Paragon, obviously, well-known profession from Guild Wars 1. Long asked for it again, like a lot of the ones we've been showing off. We're going to get to Ritualist later. Part of the lore is like, in our game, Palawa Joko kind of like crushed the Sun Spears and Paragons, but, spoiler alert, he's gone now. So Paragon as a profession has kind of come back up, kind of latched onto Warrior, and started, inspiring their allies again. Talking about the gameplay loop, we're taking what was core to Paragon. It's a heavily supportive elite specialization, and then kind of merging it to Warrior, mixing with its mechanics, how would a Warrior support its allies and command the battlefield as a Paragon once did. So we can look at the UI, and you notice you have your burst skill there, and you also have 3 new buttons, and then a little outline of something that we'll get to. To start, it uses level 1 burst skills like Spellbreaker, because those other 3 buttons, their chance, they'll also be consuming adrenaline, so we wanted to make sure that management was a bit easier. The spec can be pretty adrenaline hungry. And so level 1 burst skills just made sense.
Holy
But then
crap.
we can start talking about the chance. That's really where the profession mechanics start.
The burst skills are accurate.
So we'll hover over Chant of Action. It's going to be your first one. This is going to be your more offensive chant, and it has a couple components here. Pretty big tooltip. The first thing that happens when you activate a chant is that it's going to cost adrenaline, normal 10, like a normal burst skill. And for this one, have an initial effect. This one is that it's granting boons to your allies. And then after you activate it, a kind of passive effect called a refrain will start activating around you every interval. And so there's refrains. You see there's like 3 levels of him based on motivation. And motivation is a resource that you're going to gain when you use a burst skill.
I don't like that. That's
So
we already tried
the
that.
general gameplay flow is that you're going to turn on a chant, get a bit of motivation to start, then you're going to want to use burst skills or other chants to build your motivation even higher, so you get high levels of those refrains that are going to give pretty strong bonuses, depending on how much motivation you have. That's kind of the core of what this all says. We can move on to the second chant. That's going to be Chant of Recuperation. This one is a lot more supportive. It's going to be your healing one. So when you activate this one, you're going to give your allies a bit of barrier to kind of sustain them until the healing pulses can come through. And as you can see, you're going to pulse healing that's dependent on how much your motivation level is, as well as, at the max, you're going to also be able to pulse resistance, pretty strong boon. This one, you can see the motivation cost is higher than the Chant of Action, so it's going to cost more and be harder to upkeep. So perhaps, build up a lot of motivation when you're using your Chant of Action, and then you swap over to the Chant of Recuperation to get those really strong pulses, and so it doesn't completely drain you of the motivation as you use it.
I'm a little confused on the motivation thing. I don't think they really.
The last chant that we have is
stupid.
going to be the Chant of Freedom. This one is going to be your more utility, kind of defensive shout that we have.
Just on your
when you first activate it, you're going to break stun from allies in an area, so it's a pretty powerful effect. And then it's also going to grant boons when you pulse based on your motivation. You can see that it starts, pretty weak with swiftness, but then builds up. Next is resolution, and then finally have a really strong stability effect. And you can see that unlike the other two, this one's motivation cost is more scaling. The higher the motivation you have, the more it's going to cost. So trying to upkeep that stability is pretty hard, but keeping it at a low level 1 is going to be a lot easier.
So you gain motivation when you use a burst bar.
So those three kind of comprise what you want to be doing. You kind of always want to be having a chant active. You're getting bonuses as you swap between them
He
from
is
activating
blitzing
these
through
chants,
this.
as well as just general burst skills.
I'm so tempted to
I
pause
see
this and like
Burst Mastery
talk
gonna
to
be a
you
great
guys.
trait to take. Just give you that refund. You're gonna be using so many bursts that refund is gonna be even more noticeable, kind of similar to when we see it on Spellbreaker using burst into full counter into burst, getting a pretty good refunds.
It's got to be
there.
GMZ.
That's gonna allow you to really set up that motivation and get up to those high tiers, getting that stability or that resistance. Those
Yeah, they're guardian virtues. You're right.
Yeah, I think the thing that you're gonna have to get used to when playing this spec is like extra energy management, keeping the motivation up, being able to track how much you have and how much you want to use, so you don't drain too much, so you're able to call on those high motivation chants when you want to.
Why is the UI garbage?
Then we can go into the utilities. The utilities are going to be command. In Guild Wars 1, Paragons had pretty commanding presence on the battlefield. We wanted to extend that to this. These are going to be similar to some other effects we have in the game, as shouts, the tails we showed on Troubadour. They're going to be ally effects as you use them.
This whole
And
spec
the
is going to take
special
10
kind of
minutes,
hook
chat, for
into
them to
this
show.
is that they all have an echo. So when you use them, an initial effect is going to happen, and then kind of like your chance, after 3 seconds, an echo will happen. But you can speed up that echo by using a burst skill. So you can use your normal burst skill or your chance, but when you activate that, it'll trigger the echo no matter how much duration had left on that interval.
That's good. Don't
So
put
the
a
correct
buff
timing
on our
can
bar
really
when there's an echo
really get
timing
it,
out or
right
anything.
back to back, and potentially get a pretty powerful effect all at once. So starting with the heal, we have We Shall Return. First part of it, pretty simple, a lot like ally heals. You're going to heal yourself, heal allies around you, and then its echo effect is it's going to heal for a lesser amount, but also cleanse conditions.
Wow, this looks awful compared
pretty
to the
bread and butter what
Antiquary.
you want out of your handling slot as a support. And again, timing it correctly, making sure you have adrenaline before you use these commands can make it so that you get a lot of upfront value at once. We can move to the other utilities.
They just don't want to
the first one
develop
we
for
have is Find Their
Warrior, dude.
Weakness. This one's going to be a more offensive command. It's going to strike and apply vulnerability to allies around you, and then after the echo triggers, you're going to get might based on how many enemies you struck. And, pretty offensive leaning, of course. It's a lot of vulnerability and might, so it's a big swing in damage.
But it doesn't affect
and
your
as well,
allies.
it hits 5 targets, which can be pretty beneficial, especially on this spec. As we mentioned, adrenaline hungry. 5 hits is, 5 more ticks of adrenaline. So this can be a good builder for you. It's a low cooldown. Just a good button to be pressing to keep
does
up
have a 12-second
the assault in PvE, PvP, keep your allies' damage up. Next, we can move on to Never Surrender. This one's going to be a more defensive command. You're going to break stun and grant yourself boons. And then there's a little additional effect that we're trying here. We'll try it in some other specs as we'll see next week. It's going to be a break stun that has a longer cooldown if you successfully use the break stun effect. This is kind of trying to play with the power level we can put on a stun break. So if you use a skill without breaking a stun, it'll have a lower cooldown. So kind of like knowing that you're not going to get the value from the stun break there, so you can use it a bit more and play with how you want to save your cooldown.
That horrifies me for what's coming next week.
But we can move on to the echo effect for this. This is going to echo and give your allies the same boons. These are pretty important boons, so again, want to make sure that you're able to use that interval when you want it to happen.
I'm not seeing any stability yet,
so
guys.
it can be a pretty
These are not
interesting.
important
This
boons.
whole stun break recharge increase is new, and definitely something we're gonna keep an eye on and feedback around. It's something pretty interesting. Never been done before. Could be good. People could not like it. Very open to feedback around it.
Gives you some additional decision making of there's less opportunity cost in using a skill like this without, if you just want the defensive component, you want the resistance, you want the resolution, that's much more of an option when it's a 15-second recharge as opposed to when it's a 30-second recharge. So if you just want to use that in combat to go aggressive with that resistance, then that is much more of a realistic choice.
It's kind of my counter-argument to all of this is shake it off,
going to
in the
be
game.
brace yourselves. This is kind of your basic defensive command. It's going to apply barrier and then more barrier on the echo. So this one is, as it says, when you want to brace yourself, you see a big hit coming. Your allies are already at full, but give them a barrier to make them even more tanky versus whatever hit's about to come in. Pretty good to keep your allies topped up with that barrier.
I know the elite skill's broken, but so far this is not exciting. Again, maybe the spec is just not for me.
Lastly,
maybe people are super excited about it.
This one's also going to be an offensive command. You're going to do the damage and cripple around when you use it. And again, it's going to hit 5 enemies. That's pretty good adrenaline gain. And then when it echoes, you're going to damage again, more adrenaline, and apply weakness to the enemies.
See, that's really good with
less
leg
damage to
specialist,
you,
but
have less endurance in PvP. Weakness, pretty good condition, and with a large radius. The crippling here could be interesting, especially tactics as a trait line that Paragon is probably going to want to take. You know, get leg specialists, have an AoE immobilize, pretty good effect.
somebody just
So
said
the skill
that.
can be, I think, deceptively good based on the minor effects and how you
As opposed to all these
trait
other
into
skills that are
changing what it
deceptively
does.
good, except they're not good.
But then we can get to the elite skill, and the elite skill is one we showed, or we talked about in the blog post, showed in the video, and everyone, you know, super cool effect. Having those Paragon wings, it's We Will Never Yield. When you use it, you're going to get a buff on yourself where you cannot fall below 0.
Wow, that animation's
save,
awful.
you know, some PvE boss effects. But basically, for the most part, you can't die, which is very strong. And then
Am I
kind
just
of like
being cynical, chat? This doesn't look
rebound
fun.
is when this buff falls off. You're going to get barrier, and the barrier is going to scale based on how low your health was. Because denying death can be pretty powerful, but when damage is like constantly coming at you, you can live it at 1, and then if you don't get a little bolster after that, you just fall over. So that barrier is there. It's a little pillow to make sure that you're able to heal your allies and everyone up when that effect ends. And so the echo here is going to be how you give your allies that buff. So I think out of all the commands, this one is the most important to have lined up with a chant or a burst skill to give your allies that buff.
So it's a worse version
it's
of
something that you really want to time
Troubadour's
well,
thing.
because if you do it a bit late, you know, it's too late, they're dead. So trying to add a bit of skill expression here, just to add an extra caveat when you use a skill if you want to use it correctly. That kind of covers commands, how they play, so we can move on to the traits.
Oh, if you guys think it looks fun, I'm
First
allowed
trait
to
is
be
going to be
wrong
Rally the
about this.
Valiant, just talking about motivation and the stuff we covered with the chants. The next minor trait is going to be Inspiring Implements. Gain motivation when you use your 4th and 5th weapon skills. It's kind of a new
weird.
trigger that we're playing around with. Can kind of influence the weapons you want. Maybe some weapons have a
extremely
longer
good with
cooldown on the 4 and
rifle.
the 5, and that matters to you. You really want that motivation building, so you choose to go an offhand that has maybe lower ones. I think
Or just
you know,
run
Warhorn
rifle.
is a weapon that you can use the 4 and 5 slot decently freely, so a lot of
Or pistol.
motivation building built up. But just kind of the gist here is that it's a little extra motivation gain outside of your burst skills. Then we can move on to the Grandmaster Minor, which is Unyielding Resolve. Strike and condition damage dealt to you is reduced for each point of motivation you have.
Condition
this is going
damage,
to be a
finally.
basic defensive trait, something, you know, a supportive character would want. You can't heal your allies if you're dead.
That's true, I am
just
a
kind of
ranger, I don't
passive
care
defense
anymore.
to make sure you can stay on the battlefield, keep healing people.
For real. Honestly, I'm an antiquary now. That shit looked amazing. But we'll see.
Then we move to the Adept here. The first one's going to be Call to Action. This one's going to trigger Chant of Action when you get into combat. This will give you those motivation stacks and start the Might and Fury pulsing.
Oh my god,
It's
there's
pretty
finally a
good to like
trait.
kickstart how you play in a fight. When you first get into the fight with the spec, you want to build up adrenaline so you keep those chants. This one kind of just kind of accelerates that happening. Already gives you basically 10 free adrenaline. So in a longer, drawn-out encounter, this probably isn't giving you too much value, but I think in small skirmishes, or if you're in the open world constantly going from place to place, getting this free chant of action can be a lot of value at once and really just make it feel a bit smoother to play.
As you guys can see, it doesn't put the actual chant of action on cooldown, so you can get that initial activation, then even use chant of action again to get that extra motivation if you so choose.
Finally, a thing that gives you your resource when you enter combat.
Then the next adept trait, we're going to have Calming Ton. This one is just some small bonuses for a supportive trait. If, you know, chant of action or call to action doesn't appeal to you, this one just gives you a bit of additional concentration and healing power, so more boon duration, more healing, what you want to be doing as a support. Coming out of the adept here, just making sure that you always have a chant active to get the bonus from this. Then lastly, we have Liberating
Is the
Liaise.
icon for that a
It's
dog?
going to grant you increased movement speed, and then movement impairing conditions have reduced effectiveness on you. The movement speed is a thing that we see on a lot of traits. Warrior Sprint, kind of, this is an alternative to it if you don't want to be taking that trait. But the movement impairing conditions have reduced effectiveness is pretty new. Usually we just do reduced duration, but these are going to change how much you actually get slowed. So Cripple will slow you for less, Chill will slow you for less, which can be pretty impactful, especially in PvP scenarios. As a support, you don't want to get caught. You want to make sure you have good positioning, so this is going to help you out with that. Then we can move to the Master tier. The first one we have is brisk pacing.
There it is.
Using a chant reduces the recharge of your other chants by a set amount. This is just going to incentivize you for swapping your chants. Don't sit on chant to action constantly pulsing Mind and Fury. Want you to be swapping between the heal, between the swiftness, the stability. And if you're doing that off cooldown, you're going to get a lot of cooldown reduction.
That's Alacrity.
So if you have the
I see
adrenaline,
Alacrity,
build up
chat.
to support it, you can be really getting a lot of
I see Alacrity.
effects a lot. So a lot of power there behind that.
You see Alacrity?
Then we
I
can
see
move on
Alacrity.
to the middle one, which is Invigorating Tempo. This one's going to be a more sustained trait. Heal yourself and gain adrenaline for each point of motivation spent. So again, as with that Grandmaster Minor we talked about, you really want survivability on a support spec so that, you can keep supporting your allies and devote more of your cooldowns to them rather to yourself. And the adrenaline here is going to be a nice little refund. Cost adrenaline to get motivation, so getting some adrenaline back is kind of be like almost a burst mastery-like effect to keep it so that you don't feel too starved of adrenaline in certain situations. Then lastly, we have Reverberation. This one's going to be the utility skill trait for the spec. Command's echo can trigger a second time. So going through all those echoes we talked about, the intervals, they have the potential with this trait to get them all twice, which, elite, that's a pretty strong effect.
It is.
Making your heal better, getting more barrier. You get a lot of value out of this based on how many of those commands you have. The trigger for this will kind of work as you expect it to. It'll have like the same interval, so you use it. After 3 seconds, the echo effect will happen. Then after another 3 seconds, another echo will happen. But you can speed both those up with the burst skills. Use a command, then you use your burst skill. It happens again. Then you can use a burst skill right after to get that other echo. And get a drink before you cover the Grandmasters.
I feel like Disciplined Tactics is how you run this in World vs. World, right?
So the first Grandmaster is going to be Feverish Pulse. This one is going to be kind of like how you support with boons in game modes. In PvE, it's going to be Alacrity. And Alacrity support is something that people have known has been missing from Warriors kind of kit for a while. So this is going to be enabling the Paragon to step into that role. Hopefully do it really well. Something we want to be seeing people do in PvE. And in competitive modes, this one's actually going to give quickness. In World v. World, compete with those Firebrands, those Chronomancers. That quickness is a powerful boon there. And give it a little edge in PvE to be a more, in PvP to be a more offensive support. Something that Warrior is known for when you pick it is really making your allies, giving them a lot of might, making them hit harder.
That's so weird. They just removed all the quickness
in World vs. World. Kind of like carving out its niche there with this trait.
I think he meant that it's not a real support.
The middle one, we have Strengthening Stanzas. This one is going to be your more selfish trait.
Lifesteal.
If you don't have allies running around the World v. World, you want to play Paragon. This is kind of the trait you don't want to play Paragon with a group. This is the trait you want to take. You can see that you get a different bonus based on how many, or based on which chain you have
solo Paragon
activated.
Trait. That's neat.
Chain of Action is going to give you pretty big damage modifier. Chain of Recuperation, pretty big incoming damage reduction. Chain of Freedom is a really large movement speed. So this has a lot of powerful effects behind it based on which one you have active.
Just the fact that they're giving more
competitive modes, you could also take this. Maybe you don't need additional support for your allies. You just need to be, have that really big damage, reduced damage incoming, or really high movement speed. So you can take this trait potentially and still be a pretty good support. So a lot of potential behind this one. And then lastly, we have Enduring Refrain. This one is going to make basically all your chants better as you activate them. With this one's going to crank your support up to like the max level. It's going to cause Chain of Action to grant more might when you have the refrain going. Recuperation is going to heal more, and then Freedom is going to get increased boon duration.
Yeah, but who cares?
On top
The
of
other one
that,
gives
it's going
quickness.
to reduce the motivation cost of some of those higher levels. We saw that Recuperation cost 2, it's going to cost 1 now, and then Chant of Freedom, the upper levels will cost less. This again making it so you can keep supporting your allies with even if you can't upkeep all of that adrenaline.
I mean, just the fact they're giving Warrior more buttons is just going to make it good, right?
Different ways you can support your allies with the Paragon. That kind of, covers
the traits really brought it around for me, but
Cal's gonna hover over all the tooltips. Any words on
Paragon? Skills or the traits got a lot of good hover time, so I'm just gonna go quickly back through the skills.
It's weird that they want it to work with like 4 and 5 skills, and the spear has no synergy with its Paragon, 4 and 5 skills.
It's a lot of fun, like just having more things to spend your adrenaline on, even more so than like Spellbreaker got the F2. Now we have F2, F3, F4. Obviously, all the adrenaline traits are going to be very powerful, but it just gives you like that extra layer of decision making of like, when do I want to use my adrenaline? When do I need to build up more adrenaline so I can use multiple things back to back to back? And just going to add like a bit more depth to like typical warrior gameplay on top of being like that really strong support warrior that we've really been looking forward to adding to the game.
They're avoiding the word Bladesworn like the plague, chat.
Quickly through the commands here, and then we will transition back to a screen with just 2 of us on camera so that we can get set up for the final specializations day, which will be the Ritualist.
Like, it's boring, but like, all right, it's gonna be good and people will like it and people will play it. It's just weird it doesn't synergize with Spear at all,
And finally,
even though you need Janthier for
we
Spear.
will never yield. Fire that off one more time. Get some Paragon wings.
That is just a terrible animation.
And I hope you guys got
compared
all
to the other crap.
screenshots. If not, check out the bod after we wrap up here today. All right, getting set up for the Ritualist.
There's no way anything outlevels Gale Shot for being
But
overtuned.
I mean, all of the specs that we've previewed so far have been pretty exciting. I'm even more excited to show off the Ritualist here today. Guild Wars 1 fans, you need to keep track of all of the Guild Wars references in the Guild Wars 2 version of the Ritualist. There are quite a
But
few.
not the Paragon.
I will call out a few of them here and there, but not every single one.
Or
because
F
I would
skills.
just never stop saying, "Oh, look, a reference to a Guild Wars 1 skill." But yeah, let's talk about Ritualist. So we talked about this in the blog, the general mechanics around the spirits and how they work and how they're tied to Ritualist Shroud. The first thing we see here that when we equip the spec, we have access to F2, F3, F4. This is actually coming from the Grandmaster Minor trait. But these are what we're calling the Rupture skills. It's kind of a callback to a skill called Rupture Soul, which was destroy a spirit, and that one I believe just did damage around the spirit. But we're going to have 3 different flavors of these ruptures for each of the spirits. You will have Rupture Anguish, Rupture Wanderlust, and Rupture Preservation. These will obviously destroy that respective spirit and do some powerful effect around that area. So we see here, Rupture Anguish, this is going to be your big damage one, give some offensive boons to nearby allies. As we mentioned in the blog, we're kind of expecting that a power DPS build will exist for the Ritualist as well as a more healy support build. So offensive boons valuable in both those cases as well. Rupturing your Wanderlust, this is going to be more of that CC spirit that we'll see once we get into Shroud.
Unblockable,
This is going to
thank
do that
God.
AoE fear. There's not going to be any fear in the Shroud itself, but we will see that on the Rupture here. And finally, when you rupture the Spirit of Preservation, this is just going to give some really strong defensive boons, as you might expect from a powerful defensive spirit.
I don't
giving
think
Aegis
there are
resistance and stability
downsides to
your
classes
nearby
anymore.
allies.
Chat. I like the Paragon got
So
no
let's stop
stability.
this route and start talking about how things kind of work in here. We're going to see, I'll just start off with Anguish. This is the one that we talked about. Whoop, that string has not been encrypted yet. But it is now. It's fine. No one saw that. But as we mentioned in the blog, Spirit of Anguish is kind of your bread and butter DPS skill. Where you're going to spawn in Anguish. It's going to do a big attack. This is kind of similar to how Mesmer Phantasms work, where the spirit will come in, do a big attack.
Are they targetable?
Also, you, the Ritualist, are going to be doing some relevant component to your skill as well. We see here with Anguish, this is just setting up, more of a setup thing. I'm going to be inflicting Cripple, Vuln, applying Painful Bond. That's going to be a skill that causes my summoned creatures,
Yeah, it's just weird
which
it's on the
includes
Stunbreaker against
spirits
Jamesy.
and minions. Those are both going to deal increased damage to this target. And then we see Anguish spawns, does its big attack. This one, basically the big damage skill, does a barrage of projectiles. Increased damage to crowd control foes, increased damage per condition on those target. You know, Spirit of Anguish in Guild Wars did increased damage to hexed foes, so we see kind of a nice nod to that on the big damage skill here, Spirit of Anguish. Notably, the spirits are not targetable. They're not really attackable or
there you go.
destroyable, but that is why
They are turrets. I
exist
was
as
right.
long as you are in Shroud. We thought about this a lot as we were, building the Ritualist and thinking about, obviously in Guild Wars 1, spirits were more of that engineered turret type of gameplay, at least the offensive ones, where they would exist and be attackable and destroyable. So the counterplay was destroy the spirit.
They go through why they look like that in the blog map.
Tying it into
It's not
Shroud, we
the best
I guess I forgot to
explanation.
mention that we tied it into Shroud because this is kind of the more iconic thing that Ritualists do. We wanted to make sure that when you're playing Ritualist, you have access to these spirits, so tying them into Shroud also gave us that extra lever of, well, now the counterplay to these spirits is pressure the Ritualist out of Shroud. So these spirits are kind of sustained by your life force. As long as you are in Shroud, these spirits will exist. We see a little periodic auto attack coming out here that's going to do a little bit less damage than, say, the barrage, but as long as you're in Shroud, that's a little bit, range on that is a little weird. We'll fix that one for sure. Anguish didn't find something close enough to it to attack, but we'll see that mark here in just a second. The idea, again, just to summarize, Ritualist does a component of their skill. The Spirit spawns, does its big attack, and then transitions into this more passive state as long as you are in Shroud, periodically doing a more basic attack on your enemies. So with all that said, now we can move back to the auto attack here, Essence Blast. This is pretty similar to like a core Necro auto attack. It is going to do a little AoE explosion around the target, but it is going to get more powerful for each spirit that you have in the world. So we see kind of the weakest version here as we use that. Then we're going to spawn Anguish, spawn Wanderlust at a terrible location because we just want to increase our Essence Blast damage, and now we see just a bit more damage coming out.
They do have different back things.
So nothing too crazy, you know, a basic ranged projectile skill to complement kind of this ranged, obviously you have the ranged Anguish, you have the ranged...
I was pretty close on how I guess this would work.
We could detonate all these spirits.
We would have like commands.
Effects. One thing I did not mention about the ruptures initially is that these will automatically activate when the spirit expires. So
good.
If we just spawn Anguish, we didn't really find a great opportunity to use the rupture that we wanted to. When we're exiting Shroud, that spirit's going to explode. That's going to trigger the rupture Anguish. And if I wasn't cheating,
This is Scourge plus plus.
Except I pressed it manually. Great demonstration here by CMC. Let's take a look at this one. There we see Rupture Wanderlust going on recharge without being pressed because it is going to just trigger automatically when the spirit expires. So next up, let's actually take a look at what Wanderlust does. Some people may remember the spirit.
Oh, it does chill good.
The spirit that knocked down enemies.
And
I believe
slow.
if they were moving, not a great mechanic that translates too well into our game. So Wanderlust just going to come in, it's going to knock enemies down, and then create kind of this pulsing area that's going to inflict a few different unique conditions, do a bit of damage as well. And we saw the initial Ritualist side of this attack is more of that Ritualist lightning that, you know, was definitely seen on a few of those more offensive skills from Guild Wars. And that's going to do a nice little AoE damage and some daze. We do see here that if I use the spirit skill while the spirit is still active, it's going to destroy that spirit, triggering the rupture skill, and then spawn a new spirit at the new location. That's obviously a lot more important when I'm cheating, but we will actually see some fun traits in the future.
If Paragon hadn't given Alacrity, I'd be very depressed right now, chat. I want you to know that.
Get closer up on some of these spirit attacks.
Because this looks awesome.
We saw Rupture Anguish triggering as well. Wanderlust getting this nice little pulsing area. And the last spirit we have here, the Spirit of Preservation. Periodically healed in Guild Wars 1. Here we're going to have the Ritualist side of this giving AoE protection and vigor. And then Spirit of Preservation will pop in, do a little bit of healing. Let's heal some allies that actually have damage taken. Notably, we did make kind of an exception to the typical Death Shroud rules for the Ritualists
don't
themselves.
say it. Please, God.
Whereas this is mostly a normal Shroud where the damage is taken
Except
against
you
the
can
life
heal
force
through
pool,
it.
and you can't be healed. But there are a few exceptions where we are allowing the Ritualists to heal themselves. We'll see here with Preservation. That's going to be a heal that goes through that, but other people still won't be able to heal you. It felt, you know, a little weird that you would have a skill in a Shroud that said heal yourself and nearby allies and it just wouldn't do anything. So we're trying that out.
This better have zero barrier, chat.
Doesn't break things too horribly, and you will be able to have that kind of self-sustain here in Shroud. Notably, the Spirit of Preservation's basic attack will do a small amount of healing as well to nearby allies, in addition to doing a bit less damage than the other two. One thing I didn't mention about the auto attack Essence Blast is that this will kind of mark an enemy for your spirits to prioritize. So if the spirits find an enemy nearby that has this mark, their basic attacks will be focused on that target. If not, then they're just going to be looking at they're going to find some nearby enemy to attack. But if you want to focus these attacks on a particular enemy, just hit them with Essence Blast. Nothing too crazy. And last up, we have Summon Spirits. This one's going to be more of that
Okay.
utility-focused mobility
I don't hate
skill.
all
We're
of this
just gonna
so
see
far.
Here that it's a ground target shadow step, so good with like Z-axis situations.
The one that
But
applies
the
to
fun
shells
part here
scares
is
the
that
crap out
your
of me.
spirits will all come with you. And if they aren't currently doing something, that will also trigger a basic attack. So you do have an opportunity to get like an extra burst of damage as
this
maybe
looks
your
dope.
spirits do their auto attack. Then you teleport in with summon spirits as well, and they will do an auto attack again.
A lot of stability.
Extra damage or a little bit of extra heal.
A lot of stability.
So that's kind of how the spirits work and how the shroud works and all the ruptures and all the stuff around that. So
Good
I'm
shorter
gonna take
shift
a quick water
segment.
break before we hop into the utility skills, which are weapon spells. Another thing that some people might recognize.
Necro's getting a lot of mobility. That is true.
You know, I think to me, the interesting part about Ritualist Shroud is that it is pretty similar to core Necromancer Shroud. I think, you know, as we've gone through the elite
Actually, yeah.
specializations, Reaper was heavily melee focused, Scourge didn't have a Shroud exactly, and then Harbinger doesn't have that health effect that normal Necromancer Shrouds have. So something that's pretty similar to what Necromancers played for with a while is what really interests me the most about Ritualist spec, and how we can, you know, have another ranged shroud that also replaces your health pool and back to that kind of core Necromancer gameplay.
Yeah, for sure. And like, you know, range support is just going to be a little bit more useful than melee support.
Yeah, this VOD will be
So
up on the
weapon
YouTube as
spells,
well if you
we
missed
talked
anything,
about
guys.
this. Let's just hover one of these while we ramble a little bit. We talked about this a little bit in the blog as well, where this is obviously another mechanic that existed in Guild Wars 1, but the way that these skills worked in Guild Wars 1 is that they were ally targeted skills. You would affect a single ally, grant them this effect, and you know, they were all pretty powerful, but we've kind of seen the difficulties around ally targeted skills so far in Guild Wars 2. So we're going to have a little bit different implementation here, where these are going to give an AoE effect around you. All your allies are going to get the weapon spell effect, while the Ritualists themselves will get a full power effect. So we see here with Resilient Weapon, this is going to be a damage reduction. It's going to be a pulse heal. Might look, you know, might sound a little bit familiar, even though it works slightly differently. But pulse healing, damage reduction, increase below 50% health. And you're going to get 6 seconds of this as the... Let me just make sure I'm not going to die. As the Ritualist, you will be giving yourself 6 seconds of this, and then we'll be giving 3 seconds of this to allies. So they're going to get a little bit less duration of that damage reduction, a little bit less healing overall. But then...
I see it puts a little green
it's
dot
going
on
to
you.
be more easily usable, and like you're going to be able to give this to all your allies as opposed to having to work with that more difficult ally targeting mechanic. And we're going to see a couple different flavors of these, as with the Guild Wars 1 weapon spells. Some are going to feel a little bit more like stances, with be duration based, whereas some are going to feel a little bit more like venoms. Maybe one called Splinter Weapon. It had to be here. Is anyone surprised that Splinter Weapon is basically the same skill as it was in Guild Wars 1, because that effect translates really well into Guild Wars 2, where you
it's
are
strength
gonna
of the
have
pack.
this additional AoE strike around enemies that you strike.
At least
You're gonna
it's
give some of this to
stack-based.
enemies. You're going to give this something to your allies, so everyone can have the Splinter Weapon at the same time, and that's potentially a lot of extra splash damage hits. Maybe you can give it to a ranger and they can cast Barrage, and it will behave slightly differently than Guild Wars 1 Barrage.
It's
but
probably
you
pretty
can,
powerful
in
with the
fact,
healing
Splinter
signet.
Barrage in
You can
Guild
just
Wars
cast
2,
both on a
as
dude
soon as
and-
Ritualist is available in the beta.
Nuke them down. Callan has run on
So
sentences.
notably here, you give yourself 5 stacks of Splinter Weapon. Allies get 3 stacks of Splinter Weapon. Slight reduction. You know, maybe you have minions. You can give your minions Splinter Weapon. That's a little bit scary, but
Can you give it to your
we
summons?
will see a couple of nods to minions. You know, vaguely, we're gonna do things that affect creatures. We saw that with Painful Bond.
This is actually
We have
very
summons
condition-free
that care
so
about
far.
A spirit or a minion, because you know that is another thing that. It's not only because it's a Guild Wars callback. You know, we have a lot of elite specs that don't really care about minions. So as we're building out the Ritualist, we knew that there's a lot of associations already. Obviously, the spawning power attribute in Guild Wars 1 made your minions more powerful, and there were other things that cared about summon creatures in Guild Wars 1. We'll see that a lot more in the traits as well. So there is kind of that opportunity to play with some minions, play with Splinter Weapon, give your minions Splinter Weapon, and that is potentially really fun, potentially a lot of damage, and we do want to lean into that opportunity for minions to be a more viable playstyle with Ritualist especially. So we saw Splinter Weapon. Next we'll see Nightmare Weapon. Another one that translates pretty well. This is going to be more of that defensive. You have some lifesteal with the big peak.
Oh, that's
big thing here is
horrifying.
going to be a pretty meaty heal. Allies are obviously going to get a lower duration of this, but you will just get some extra life stealing off of your strikes. Maybe I should take some
That's
damage
just Splinter Weapon,
so
but
I
better,
can
because lifesteal
actually
goes
get
through
some value
toughness.
out of my lifesteal. But here we see that's obviously triggering off life siphon as well.
They're being
getting
very
even more
conservative with the
healing,
stacks.
but this is a nice little self-survivability tool. Obviously, you can give it to your allies as well. They're going to get a little bit of healing there, and you're also going to stack up a bunch of vulnerability on your enemy. Next up, we'll take a look at the Weapon of Remedy. This is going to be more of that condition removal type of effect. This is going to be another one of those duration-based buffs, where every second you're going to remove a condition from yourself or from the allies that are affected by this, and every time that you do remove a condition, it will give you a little bit of healing. So a nice little, pretty low duration, that nice little cleanse over time with a little extra on top with that nice little heal.
It's like no Condi on this. That's actually really surprising to me. I expected this to be a full
Last up, we
torment
have
spec.
Weapon of Warding. This is another one that is, a pretty iconic weapon spell. So we wanted to find a way to translate into Guild Wars 2, and blocking attack 50% of the time, maybe not the best mechanic for this game, so we're not doing anything like that. This is just going to be a stack-based block similar to like the Arcane Shields or the Shields of Wrath.
That's still very good.
Guild Wars 2
That's still
universe. We're gonna
extremely
see-
good.
You're going to get 3 block stacks. Allies are going to get a single stack of that blocking
Oh,
buff.
okay, single. I was
And,
like 3 for allies.
There's a little
Holy
bit of regen
crap,
in
dog.
there. Grant a little bit less regen to your allies. When this expires, that's also going to be giving protection. So whether that expires on timeout,
So it's like
or because your ally blocked, or
Why
you
doesn't it
blocked,
just give ages? Whatever. Who
giving that
cares?
protection at the
Or
end.
through the
because,
veil.
You don't really need it when you're blocking attacks most of the time. And last up, we have kind of an exciting mechanic, exciting new
Here we-
mechanic that is, again, kind of inspired by Guild Wars 1
Scared.
pretty heavily.
I'm just
There's going to
scared.
be Zinray's weapon or Zinrai's
Stability,
weapon. I don't
sick.
know how to pronounce it. I'm sure chat knows whether it's Zinray's or Zinrai's. I always say Zinray. But the idea here is that this is going to give you stacks of a buff. Allies will get a single stack. You will get 2 stacks of this buff. And this buff says that when you take
Steel
damage
knife.
over a percentage of your maximum health, it is going to heal for the difference. This is slightly different than how the mechanic worked in Guild
breaks
Wars.
stun.
We saw this on
I don't
stuff
like that.
Protective Spirit, Protective Bond. Obviously, Zinrai's weapon. It is a pretty interesting defensive tool. We wanted to try it out. It's a little scary as well.
Yeah.
So it is on the elite skill here, and there are
The elite skills for this expansion are
I
nuts,
mentioned
dude.
The implementation here is a little bit different, so that there are kind of additional holes in here. This is not going to just set that incoming damage to 5%, because this way, if you take a lethal strike, you will actually die. This won't prevent you from getting, killed by a boss attack that says you die instantly, or it does just so much damage that you are going to die from this strike. But if you survive the strike and it did more than 5% of your max health, it is going to heal you for the difference, and then you're also going to do a little bit of lifesteal to that enemy. Pretty fun idea, pretty powerful defensive tool. Is also going to break stun for allies and give them just a single stack of stability. We saw the big stability over here on Rupture Preservation, but a nice little bonus stack of stability to your allies. And you can obviously give them the Zinray's weapon as well, so they can have a single instance of that defensive mechanic. Very good against things like Kill Shot, not as much against things like Rapid Fire, for example. I'm going to take a quick water break for setup for our final burst through the traits. And anything you wanted to mention, Taylor?
Now just calling out, there's a lot of, weapon spells have a lot of different uses. There's a lot of defensive ones, and the offensive ones are pretty different from each other. So it's going to be interesting seeing how this mixes
Zero
with the kit
animations.
that
I'll trade you
Necromancer
for
already
the
has.
Paragon ones.
Has some pretty niche but really powerful supportive effects, I'd say. So seeing how it fills out when you want to play a support ritualist or even like a DPS ritualist that takes a couple of these should be interesting to see what people.
Not gonna lie, the Antiquary seemed the most interesting to me.
Weapon. All right, moving into the traits.
All right, let's see the traits.
put on
This is
some
what
random
got me
traits
excited for
this horizon.
Paragon, so
Keep
let's-
flashing one last time today.
Let's see.
Kicking things off with the minor trait that explains the pressure mechanic. Spawning power, obviously a callback to the primary attribute of the Ritualist. A nice little nod here on a trait that doesn't actually do anything other than tell you how all of these things work. Next up, we're going to see Boon of Creation. This is going to be a little bit more of that life force generating.
Wonder if that counts for
type of
runes
trait.
and stuff.
Every time you summon a creature, so a
Relics.
spirit or a minion, you're going to get some life force.
Dude, if that works
So
with
notably,
the...
you know, you can use this outside of Shroud with
there's one that
minions in order to build
spawns
up
a
life
death
force towards
thing,
Shroud.
you kill
When
something.
you're already in Shroud, you're going to be getting some life force back every time that you summon a spirit, so just giving you a little bit more uptime on
It's like
those
a
spirits
real
as
ass
well,
minion spec.
and just giving you that additional life force. Nice little, effectively a defensive minor trait here. Next up, as mentioned, Ruptured Souls. This is going to be the thing that's actually giving you access to the Rupture skills. We wanted these to be pretty powerful. You know, we saw a lot of damage, a lot of might, fury. Obviously, the huge boons here on Rupture Preservation. But we wanted to make these skills strong enough that we felt it is essentially the trait level strength of those effects, as opposed to making
I don't know
them
if they actually did
significantly
use the
worse
ult.
and then putting a different effect here in the Grandmaster slot. Moving into the adept
guarantee
traits.
Taunt's not
The
his
first one
favorite
here is
condition.
kind of a fun one. Wandering Spirits. This is going to cause your spirits to
that's neat.
basically follow you around. So it's going to play around, looking to spawn in Anguish. And the idea is that every time Anguish goes to auto attack, or any of the other spirits go to auto attack, they're going to first move
Actual
closer to your
functionality
position.
changes. I love this.
So, not as relevant if you're fighting a stationary boss, but maybe you're running around the open world, and you're going to want your spirits to be following you around as you're moving. You know, moving. You know, hopefully
they had
being
an
near
animation
enemies
on the
still,
teleport.
such that your spirits will be attacking things. But this is giving you that opportunity to not have them locked to a single position when summoned. Next up, we'll take a look at Spirit's Gift. Add another one to your tally of
Horrifying.
Guild Wars 1 references, but this is, you know, another thing that makes a lot of sense. Every time you summon a creature, spirit, or minion, you will heal and remove conditions from nearby allies. We wanted to make this one trigger around yourself because if you are, you know, throwing a Wanderlust, for example, out at an enemy to knock them down, we still wanted to give you that healing to you and your allies at your location. So this one does behave slightly differently in that it triggers around yourself. But this is another case where we kind of made an exception. Spirit's Gift will allow you to heal yourself when you are in Shroud, because you know, a lot of the creatures that you are summoning are going to be in Shroud, whether or not you have minions. Next up, we have Explosive Growth. Kind of
It's weird that
the
it's not
collection
supported
of
all.
Ritualist enchantment spells, because really what are traits other than enchantments that never expire. But Explosive Growth, every time you summon a creature, deal damage to enemies around
That's
that
a
creature.
lot of damage.
So again, I'm going to run in, spawn my bone minions. That's going to do a couple of procs of Explosive Growth. You go into Shroud, summon some spirits. This one's going to be triggering around the enemies, because again, I'm going to spawn Wanderlust on top of my enemies, and I actually want that damage trigger to happen around them. So both of these traits kind of work the way that you would want them to, but a nice little potentially bursty damage trait here in the bottom of the adept slot. Next up, we're going to see Wielder's Remedy. This is going to cause weapon spells for move conditions, obviously from yourself and from allies. Similar mechanic where allies get a slightly lower effectiveness here. You're going to cleanse 2 from yourself, remove 1 from allies, and that's just how it's going to be. You know, a powerful defensive option if you have a bunch of weapon spells on your bar. Here in the middle, we have Empowering Spirits. This is going to be that boon trait. I'm going to give some quickness as in addition to other boons here when you summon a spirit. So every time you summon Anguish, you're going to give might and quickness to nearby allies. Then you're going to summon Wanderlust, give quickness and fury to nearby allies. And similarly, with the Spirit of Preservation, you will give resolution and quickness to nearby allies. So, you know, pretty straightforward boon DPS trait.
Quickness
You're gonna
healer,
be
that's
going
what
into
Selfir
Shroud,
wanted.
Summoning your spirits, giving some boons, and that's going to be quite useful.
See if it has 2 quickness traits.
And last up, we have Spirit's Strength. spirits deal more damage and their healing is increased. This one's pretty straightforward. Kind of plays into the more aggressive spirit builds where you're going to be
That's a
summoning
big number.
Anguish, Wanderlust. I mean, even Preservation does some damage, but this is going to affect both the initial attack here from Anguish as well as any follow-up auto attacks. Same idea with Wanderlust, where the initial damage coming from this pulsing field will be increased as well. And then also the auto attack, and finally Preservation is going to do additional healing in addition to additional damage on its auto attack, and and that healing burst that happens will also be increased by this trait. So this is just, you know, leaning as heavily as you want into the spirit strength. They're significantly stronger. Three more traits to go. Kicking things off with Wielder's Boon. This is kind of an additional weapon spell trait where
Oh God!
all your allies are going to get the full effect of this. So this is, I mean, it's good with all of them. This is also going to work with Wielder's Remedy. Whether or not it does right now, I have to double check because that was kind of a late adjustment, but it will give you the full effectiveness of Wielder's Remedy as well. So 2 Condy removals,
Oh, no.
but now you can give your allies 5 stacks of Splinter Weapon. You can
So that's
give them
what,
full
3
duration
different
of Resilient
E-specs that
Weapon.
have a thing that just
You
makes
know,
your allies immortal?
Basically, if you are looking to
Troubadour,
get
Paragon,
those
Ritualist?
powerful moments of the weapon spells, now you can get even more of that to your allies.
That's kind of nuts.
And then the next trait is going to be Lingering Spirits. So this is something that we kind of alluded to in the blog post, where there is a way to get your spirits to persist outside of Shroud, and that is if you have the Lingering Spirits Grandmaster trait. So the way that this works is that anytime you exit Shroud and you still have life force remaining, let's just go in, let's spawn some spirits. I'm going to leave immediately with full pool of life force. These spirits are going to continue to exist, and
Hey,
also
welcome.
the life force drain from Shroud is continuing to exist here. Notably, this makes the spirits attack a little bit faster as well, so you get a little bit of haste, quickness of their attack interval. So, you know, if you're trying to maximize your damage from your spirits, you'll probably take like Lingering Spirits, Spirit Strength. That's going to be like the most sustained damage. And, you know, maybe you even have Wandering Spirits on because you're running around the open world, and now you're having this, you know, Spirit Army kind of following you around, attacking nearby enemies. And that will last as long as you have spirits active, or as long as you have the life force. It will kind of snapshot your life force pool when you exit, so you can't continue to build up life force on top of that. We'll see this here. It's giving you this buff for a duration. This is kind of based off how much it calculated Shroud time you had remaining
That's weird.
as you exited Shroud. And, you know, we're going to be keeping a close eye on this one, whether the life drain needs to be a little bit higher when you're out of Shroud, but the idea is that you will be converting your remaining life force
Looks interesting,
into
right,
duration
Evelyn?
of your spirits, and then the life force you gain on top of that will not be consumed by those spirits. It will just be building.
I think
towards
that's
your
probably
next
the most balanced
usage
out of the 3.
Shroud. Importantly, if you do rupture all of your spirits, it will turn off and stop draining your life force, because, you know, it might feel bad if it did.
There's this weird habit of them having like one that's psychotically overtuned,
And
one
last
that's
but not
undertuned, one that's
least, we
just right.
have, you know, one last Guild Wars callback to a powerful elite skill that some of you might have heard of. It's called Soul Twisting. Works pretty similarly. You can only get a single instance of this because it might be
Disgusting.
a little bit too broken. If
Absolutely
you could recharge all of your spirit
disgusting.
skills instantly. But the first spirit skill that
Oh,
you
only
use when
first,
entering
okay.
Ritualist Shroud will recharge immediately.
Still
So we
disgusting.
can see here, you know, go in.
Wait, what? Doesn't
spawn
one of the
Anguish,
Shroud skills
that's gonna do
recharge
its
the
thing,
Necro Spear
then
crap?
It's going to recharge immediately, so I can use Anguish
Wait,
again.
hold
gonna
on,
trigger that
no.
Rupture Anguish, spawn a new Anguish, going to do its big burst again, and that's kind of an opportunity to get a burst of damage or a burst of CC if we want to use it with Wanderlust, or again, a burst of healing using it with Preservation. You basically get to choose, at the moment that you enter Shroud, you know that you can get a burst of one of these 3 spirits, do it twice. You know, Preservation, pretty good option, because that's going to be triggering a Rupture Preservation, giving that stab resistance Aegis, and, you know, if you have enough life force, maybe it'll be still around the next time this skill becomes available. So some pretty powerful stuff that you can do with Soul Twisting. Get some healing. Do it again. Get some boons. Pretty strong stuff. And I mean, this trait's a lot of fun. Lingering Spirits is a lot of fun. There's a lot of fun traits. A lot of
Okay, it
fun
recharges when you
interactions,
exit
a
Shroud.
lot of fun.
I thought it
Guild Wars
recharged in Spear
callbacks,
4.
but,
Alright.
you know, obviously it's not going to be exactly the same, but it is heavily inspired by, I think we're pretty excited about it. Love to get players' hands on it. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you don't like. And that's the Ritualist. I'll do one last hover.
Yeah, maybe it's
of
the
all
Shroud 4
skills
triggers the
here,
heal mark on
and then we're
staff.
going to wrap up the stream for today.
Because that's scary.
Any thoughts, Taylor, on the
Yeah,
Ritualist?
I think just another disclaimer that the numbers you guys see as we hover everything are still in flux. We're actively tweaking them. A lot of like the initial things we put are very, very much vibe based. Before the
Vibe-based.
beta, gonna go back through and make sure things are closer to how we want them. Obviously, use the beta for fine tuning things. So some numbers might seem pretty crazy. Maybe they're not crazy.
Design based on vibes, chat.
But just keep that in mind as you're looking at the value for things. But largely, the functionality of the tooltips should be correct.
Bone minions. That's not a Ritualist skill. Maybe it will be for a number of the people in the chat. I love playing Minion Necro because all the minions get the Arena Guild tag when they follow you around. So, maybe Ritualist is the Necro spec for me.
Yep.
Open of warding. Sinray's weapon.
Press it.
And I guess we should show off the Shroud skills one last time.
Or just not.
Essence Blast. Of course, granting me might because I have the Spite trait line equipped. Spirit of Anguish.
It's definitely going to be interesting. It's kind of got the
Spirit
turret
of
thing going
Wanderlust.
from... That one scares me. Kind of got the...
Is not a leap finisher. Don't believe the skill fact here. Spirit of
weird.
Preservation.
Okay.
And last but not least, that's Summon Spirits.
Kind of got the
Now,
turret thing that Guild Wars 1
have
Ritualist
quite
had
enough
going
time.
on.
There we go. Plenty of time. Watch the VOD. Get your screenshots. I think that's all we have to cover.
That doesn't have a
today.
cast time. That scares me.
So let's go
Yep.
back to this screen over here. So you can all see Taylor's beautiful face in a much larger size.
Yay.
Yep, as Taylor mentioned, a lot of stuff. Obviously not final. Getting ready for the beta. We'll just say this all again because it is important. We're going to be doing a lot of iteration based off of the beta feedback. So if things are not exactly perfect for the beta, we're not surprised. So hopefully you guys aren't super surprised either. Next week we'll be back with
We'll be back.
3 more elite specs. They might all be for the Revenant profession.
They're gonna be big.
There's 3 Revenant
As opposed to
elite
these
specs left,
ones.
I think.
I will
No,
say I haven't seen anyone correctly guess Revenant, so you guys need to keep churning those out until next week.
Obviously, we have the Revenant, the Engineer, and the Elementalist. Really exciting stuff coming next week. I mean, we just showed a bunch of exciting stuff. We showed a bunch of exciting stuff last week. The excitement doesn't end until the beta begins, at which point the excitement keeps going again.
Completely falls off a cliff.
Any
Hopefully I've
final thoughts,
seen-
Taylor?
Yeah, I've seen a lot of good feedback from the things we showed last week. Hoping to see same level of feedback on the things we showed this week. Really happy to see all the conversation that's going on. As mentioned before, the forums and other forms of social media is a great place to have conversations. We're always watching, taking feedback from you guys, and noting it down. I think even like pre-beta, seeing the things we can do, tweak it a little bit, so when it goes in, you guys have the best things to play with.
And I love seeing the script versions of the elite spec profiles. So, looking forward to the rest of them.
Yeah, excited to see the script version of the Antiquary.
Yeah. What would it
But
even
better have a
be?
little dude that
Is
it
it a
throws
script
out.
with a script sidekick, or is it a script
Yeah,
with a
exactly.
human sidekick? Nobody knows.
Yeah.
I just refresh. I
Find
constantly F5 looking for the Antiquary script version, and I don't see it. Anyway, thanks everyone for coming out, seeing the glorious stream in 1080p with sensible microphone levels and all that stuff. Maybe next week we'll see Roy. He hasn't
Maybe.
confirmed yet, but we'll just keep harassing him until he says absolutely. So hopefully we will see Roy here on the stream next week. But otherwise, we are going to wrap up and call it, and we will, of course, see you all in the mists.
All right, that was dope. Little bit of a wrap up chat. You got about 2 minutes before I head to the gym. This looked cool. I'm excited. I'm excited for Alacrity actually being on Paragon and then not just glossing over that forever. Go back and watch the VOD. It should be up on the YouTube channel. We'll have a podcast coming down the pipeline, so get subbed, followed, all that nonsense. If you'd like it here, I am Pseudo. We talk about builds. I stream Monday, Wednesday, sometimes Friday at 9 Eastern PM. Roaming around the Borderlands, give away gold every Monday, and these all look dope. I'm actually weirdly excited for the Antiquary. It seems like it has meaningful trait choices, which are kind of the thing that gets me going in build crafting. But let me know what you guys thought. Thank you for joining. Thank you for hosting. We'll obviously do this again next Friday as well for the last 3 probably completely broken elite specs. So stay tuned for that and have a good day. Cheers. I will see you guys in Tyria. Peace out.